Iranian activists tell NBC News hundreds of thousands of anti-government demonstrators are on the streets in multiple cities, including the capital, Tehran. And they're pushing hard, tearing up Iranian flags, setting fires, and in some cases, confronting the feared security forces. Why now? The economy is collapsing, with inflation and a currency crisis. Look at this market. None of the shops have customers. Why? Because people don't have any money, said this man. Also, Iran was significantly weakened after last summer's 12-day war launched by Israel and the United States, and the destruction of Iran's backers, the Lebanese militia Hezbollah and the former Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad.
So let's talk today about the current situation in Iran. Although this is not something that's being heavily covered in the media, it obviously matters a lot on the world stage because it's interesting. I think the trend we've basically seen in just 1 year of the Trump administration is that the entire anti-American axis is basically coming undone due to his foreign policy without having to really fire a shot. I mean, we have fired some shots, but you know what I mean by that. Because the fear for many years now has been that the coalition of China, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and I guess North Korea would be the greatest geopolitical threat that America faced in the 21st century. And obviously for many decades, Americans have had this anxiety that perhaps our position is starting to slip on the global stage. But in 2025 and now 2026, everything seems to be trending in the opposite direction. Not only has America still reasserted its dominance as the sole superpower on the world stage, but we've also dealt pretty deadly blows to our adversaries, whether that's the Iran nuclear strikes of last year that definitely did not topple the Iranian regime, but dealt a significant blow to them, or what we just did in Venezuela, where we obviously just basically took out the regime by taking out its leader, and now we are in full control. And now it is currently the situation where massive anti-regime protests are erupting in the country of Iran, largely due to economic concerns, but also a general discontent of their government. And definitely you can say their grip on power here is beginning to slip. And I think it is so impressive that Trump has managed to do all of this without getting into the prolonged forever wars and invasions that obviously Americans fear for good reason. All it took was basically a couple of trade wars and some special limited military operations to get done what we wanted. And the most impressive part of it all, folks, is that thus far, at least, knock on wood, we've managed to get away with it. In every single case, the kind of big dogs, right, China and to an extent Russia, have not really responded or retaliated to the actions we've taken against some of their top allies, which either expresses a level of fear, right? Like America really is that strong and there's nothing that their allies can do about it, or maybe especially in a case like China, perhaps the bond between those nations is not as strong as we thought. Perhaps China's in a situation where, hey, we still want to get this trade deal done. We don't want to be too adversarial to America because that's not in our interest. Perhaps the same is true of Russia with peace negotiations. I don't exactly know, but I do want to discuss all of this here today. The situation in Iran and what it means bigger picture for the kind of alliance against America, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, the scene in Iran for the past several weeks now has been massive protests taking place in actually over 100 cities by this point. Take a look at some of those videos, by the way. Now, look, it is true that Iran has seen anti-regime protests under the Ayatollah, but make no mistake, I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this. Protests sweeping through every single province, hundreds of different cities. The crowds, as you can see visibly, are massive, and the situation now has gotten so desperate for the Iranian regime tonight that they've been forced to close off airspace and allegedly commit a digital blackout, right? Turning off all the internets, all the phones, all the cell service, so that way the news of what is going on in their country cannot get out to the rest of the world. Yes, absolutely, something here is going on and it's getting pretty dire for them. Now, make no mistake, it could be true that the regime survives these protests, but the overall point for America is what? Undeniably, their grip on power is being weakened, even if you make it through this, right? Definitely, you're gonna have to make some reforms when we'll explain today, like the reason that they're protesting, perhaps the Iranian government going forward, whether we see a full change in government or some type of moderation or reform or opening up. Definitely the amount of money they spend on anti-American activities, their own military, their military proxies around the world, this whole system that they've set up and been running for many decades does appear to be on its last legs for the reasons we'll explain in a second. But if you are at all wondering what these protests are actually about, according to reporting here, at least from the AP, we'll tell you about that. So Iran's government cut off the country from internet and international phone calls Thursday night as a nighttime demonstration called by the country's exiled crown prince drew a mass of protesters to shout from their windows and storm the streets, which is also very interesting. So these protests apparently were kind of somewhat going on before. There was a lot of discontent, but it all really kicked off when the crown prince of Iran, or Persia, I guess, right? The exiled one who would currently be the Shah today if you never saw the revolution and toppling of that system back in the 70s and 80s. He called on the country to rise up in protest. Now, if you're all wondering whether the average Persian person right now at least is missing the Shah or wants to see some type of change in power, that was the response. What you saw in those videos. Like, I don't know the exact count, but likely hundreds of thousands of people all showing up in the streets. But it isn't just about the Shah, guys. I think it is pretty clear as to maybe the kind of popular reason this is all happening. The demonstrations that have popped up in cities and rural towns across Iran continued on Thursday. More markets and bazaars had shut down in support of the protesters. So clearly, whatever repression at this point the regime is still trying to do, not working all that well, although we have seen violence, at least 42 people killed, 2,000 detained. And yet clearly the situation allegedly right now is that the protests are so big, so massive, and so widespread, Iranian authorities cannot really keep up with everything that's going on. And after all, it's kind of one of those situations where they cannot arrest us all. Now, to answer the question of what is this really about, by my understanding, although these have now evolved into wider anti-government protests, the Shah is getting involved, it appears that the original core grievance, the reason why people took to the streets in the initial first place, is because of economic concerns. As you could imagine, the Iranian economy is struggling. There's massive inflation due to a couple of different factors. Sure, the Western and U.S. sanctions definitely play a role, but I'd also argue the amount of money that the Iranian government is investing in, global terrorism instead of its own citizens giving to its own people. Yes, that is an issue. Ironically, I would argue Iran has a problem of the forever wars that we often talk about as it pertains to their own people. And of course, there's just overall mismanagement and backwardness of their, Islamic theocracy system definitely does not help the entire situation. And after all, that shouldn't be all that surprising, because at the end of the day, really, no matter where you are on Earth, right? The old saying that it's the economy, stupid, absolutely does ring true. And yes, when Iran is in a situation where whatever ideology is ruling them, whether they support, Islamic theocracy or they want a more secular or whatever government back, whatever it is, right? At the end of the day, when people can't afford to live, they rise up and they get angry. Now, what's happened in Iran is, sure, the maximum pressure campaign, the sanctions that Trump has put in and other, some past U.S. governments, but especially Trump's been really big, right, on sanctioning Iran, not letting them sell their oil as easily to other parts of the world. That's now had the domino effect of, hey, the citizens are unhappy with their economy. They're rising up against their government. See how kind of the geopolitical chess here all works? And by the way, Iran is in an extremely vulnerable position because I don't know if you've noticed as well, but China and Russia have essentially abandoned them. One of my core concerns for years about getting in military involvement with Iran was not just Iran itself, but the fact that it could start some type of World War III situation where China and Russia come to the defense of their ally and one of their top oil suppliers. But you saw what happened last year. Instead of actually coming to their aid, they basically stood back and did nothing. And very quietly, Beijing, after seeing how much of a joke and a paper tiger the Iranian military actually was, is not talked about a lot, but basically started to somewhat withdraw their support and back off. So really now, right, as a result of everything Trump did, both militarily and geopolitically and on trade and all of that, right, the different leverage he's playing, not just with Iran, but also saying, hey, China, look, we're trying to do a trade deal with you as well, so keep us in the cards. Hey, Russia, I'm trying to negotiate peace in Ukraine with you as well, so, keep in mind, you still have reason to come to the United States for something. Iran in itself has now just been basically left alone and screwed, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but first, take a listen here to some more of the details as to apparently what's going on in that country, because I want to talk about some of this. It's pretty interesting.
And anti-government demonstrations are spreading to more major cities across Iran, even as officials threaten to intensify crackdowns and prosecute protesters. Trey Ying's keeping an eye on this. And Trey, what do you think is different this time than before, if anything?
Yeah, Dana, good morning. These protests continue to spread across Iran, with clashes reported in multiple different cities. Human rights organizations say demonstrations are now taking place in 111 different locations. A new video shows Iranians destroying a flag in northeast Iran. These protests began in late December over the country's weak currency and poor living conditions, but have now expanded amid broader anti-government sentiments. In an effort to calm the rising tension, the government in Tehran passed a bill this week to pay all Iranian households the equivalent of $7 a month.
In my view, they saw that they couldn't rein in the inflation, so they said, let's give people 1 million tomans so that we can somehow absorb the pressure, to hold it back. I mean, it's like a temporary painkiller.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a joke, but what does that ring? What does it look like, right? A government that's in desperation. And when you see protests in 111 different cities, not necessarily in America, keep in mind, where protest is normal, but in a country like that, yes, you are in deep, deep, huge trouble. And by the way, let's kind of play this both sides, because there's two outcomes here. Either the Iranian government, as it currently stands, right, this regime just collapses, or it manages to survive. But very likely, if they want to manage to survive, there's going to have to be some degree of reform made so that people stop getting pissed off. You keep talking about inflation. You keep talking about the economic crisis that they're in. Well, obviously, a big way they could solve that is dropping all of this ideological crap. And again, first of all, stop spending so much money on terrorism and start investing in your own economy. But secondly, right, seeing a dropping, yes, this would be big for them and obviously their economy, right, of U.S. and Western sanctions. How do you drop the U.S. and Western sanctions? Well, yeah, it's also very simple. Drop all of this anti-American activity, obviously, and all of this, funding of terrorism around the world. So, again, it's not for me to say whether there's a brand new government in Iran or the Iranian government tries to fix its own problems. But what I'm noticing from just a geopolitical standpoint as an American is following the Iran nuclear strikes and now these protests, their ability to kind of wage war and terrorize the Middle East and try to undermine America in a lot of different ways, or even work alongside allies with like China, who really don't seem to be caring that much for Iran anymore, is completely broken and destroyed. And that's what I see, and that's what frankly matters to me, right? And the brilliant part about all of it is, for many years, even actually the Bush administration, it was a discussion back then, right? Should we invade Iran? Should we do an Iraq war style 2.0? And obviously that would be a bad idea. I don't need to get into that, right? It's not something I would ever support. It's something, frankly, I've always been deeply concerned of. Like I hope that does not happen. But clearly we're seeing, no, Trump basically managed to thread the needle where you could get everything that America wants and actually America would benefit from objectively, while at the same time not having to get our boys, involved in any forever war. Brilliance, right? And frankly, this is the type of stuff I don't think Trump gets enough credit for. We talk a lot about his foreign policy, and sometimes that's, in the guise of peace. Hey, look what he did in Gaza. Look what he's trying to do in Ukraine. Smaller stuff like, Cambodia and Thailand almost went to war. India, Pakistan, stuff like that. But from an American perspective, the chess moves he's making right now to basically secure American dominance in the 21st century aren't really going noticed a whole lot. But yes, he's breaking that anti-American axis as we speak. he just opened Venezuela and basically flipped Venezuela from one of them now to one of us, and now we're getting their oil as well. The whole Greenland and Denmark thing, a lot of people don't understand. It's the same thing. It's about control over both natural resources and strategic control of the Arctic, which is going to be a huge region to watch going into the 21st century. So, if we look, say, in 2050, and surprisingly, as a country, we sit there and say, wow, we made it. I mean, I remember the early 2000s. It was kind of like the 70s with Vietnam. America really thought it was slipping, but we had that comeback, right? And we're still kind of number one of the world. You can look back and say it's all having to do with what Trump did in geopolitics back in the 2020s, right? This is actually huge stuff. And again, maybe it's complicated, maybe it's underappreciated, but I want people to understand that. And this is all done. Let me repeat that. Without actually having to go invade anyone directly or get into a forever war, which we all love, right?
Amid the backdrop of ongoing demonstrations, some Iranian leadership traveled to Lebanon, where the country's foreign minister held a press conference. This comes as Israel is continuing to launch airstrikes against Iran's proxy there, Hezbollah, that officials in Jerusalem say is regrouping, and as the region braces for the possibility of another direct war between Israel and Iran.
We are fully prepared for any situation. We don't want war, but we are ready for war. We are also ready for negotiations, but only negotiations that are based off mutual interests and respect.
Well, already, I mean, given the way that these Islamic radicals and Iranian officials usually talk, they're usually so tough, right? The United States evil empire, they're going to come down. That is a noticeably muted tone where he's saying, oh, we're ready to negotiate. We don't want war, blah, blah, blah. Does seem to suggest some degree of weakness. I'll just point that out. And after all, I mean, what happened the last time Iran tried to fight a war, right? I mean, these people allegedly have been waiting decades for their big clash and their big confrontation with Israel and America. And then Israel kicked the crap out of them. America kicked the crap out of them. It was an embarrassment. They even lost the support of their top allies. Frankly, going forward, if they are at all logical, if they have any sense of self-preservation, they likely have to understand we have to drop this whole militaristic thing, okay? It's just done. It's just not going to work. And maybe let's be more of like a reasonable, cooperative actor on the world stage, right?
While President Trump ordered strikes that destroyed Iran's nuclear program, the country still has a variety of ballistic missiles that could be fired at Israel if another war erupts. Dana?
All right, Trey, thanks for keeping an eye on things. We'll be in touch.
So
ballistic missiles, that last time barely hit anything? And, even if you want to make the argument, well, Iran was a little too scared to get too involved and their use of force was a little bit limited. Okay, but what does that also suggest? They're a little bit scared right now of what's going to happen. So look, going forward, I have no clue what is actually going to happen in Iran, but what I will say is a couple of things. First and foremost, objectively, either way, it's good for the United States. Because either that regime falls or that regime's grip on power is severely weakened, its ability to wage war even more than it already was destroyed earlier last year, is destroyed even more, and that's a good thing for us. Simultaneously, what I would also like to point out is that to the people over there, Iran, or I guess I properly there should say Persia, absolutely is a place that is capable of being a functional and even thriving civilization. As much as we dogpile on third world countries on this channel, we talk about Somalia and how historically it's always been a failed state. That's not true of Iran, or frankly, a lot of even other Middle Eastern countries who have just fallen to radical Islam and jihad. Because, you look at the history, obviously, of Persia. I think that's something that should be well known. They're historically one of the major global power players. Their people, I think, are like top 2 or top 3 highest IQ in the world. You absolutely can build something there, but obviously it's going to take stopping the ideological capture of that regime, right? Everything that they believe in. Hey, let's kind of dedicate our function not to serving our citizens, but to waging global jihad, and let's constantly be antagonizing basically everyone in the region, right? The other Gulf states, but also Israel, but also America. And what's the point of it? What benefit does it actually give to the Iranian citizens? I don't know. But that said, let me know your thoughts, guys, on all of this in the comment section down below. And look, just to be clear, actually, I'm going to close by saying this. Before you say I become a neocon, this is not me saying America should go invade or America should go liberate people. Like Iran, much like Iraq, has kind of been one of those issues for me for a long time. I haven't wanted to get too involved in. I feel a lot differently about Venezuela because, again, that's sort of my philosophy, right? Monroe Doctrine, care about your hemisphere first. I care about drugs. I care about mass migration a lot more than I do, some people in the sand overseas. But objectively, right? When you look at the coalition, when you look at the alliance, yes, in some way or another, whether you want to say it's neocon propaganda or not, Iran does pose some degree of like a geopolitical, if not threat, at least an annoyance to America worldwide, for sure, right? And objectively, if you can like basically manage to bring them down without having to do too much, without having to sacrifice too much, that's a good thing, right? So like, don't mistake that for neoconservatism. Neocons will say, oh, go out and invade them. Oh, go install democracy. I don't care necessarily about the government that is there or whatever. I just care about their global stance and their global relationship against America. And yes, if what they're doing right now kind of ceases, and by the way, China and Russia lose a valuable asset for themselves as well, that's a good thing. Okay, but anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.